Well, hello everybody. So we've been through all the invertebrate classes of animals. We've been through plants, we've been through fungi, we've been through protists and bacteria. So here we are at chordates, which what chordates are means they have a spinal cord at least sometime during their life. So I want to go over those characteristics today, and then I'm also going to go over two groups of chordates in this presentation. Okay, so the first thing you need to realize is what chordate characteristics they have. So these are 5 that I've put up here. Scientists agree definitely on 4 of those, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they have these characteristics sometime during their life. They may lose them later on, they may not. So there's a notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, gill slits, muscle blocks, and then a post-anal tail, which all that means is the tail is after the anus. That makes sense. Okay, so here is the basic body plan. Now, try not to get too fixated on it. It's just a layout. Obviously, humans, dogs, cats don't look much like this, but they do sometime during their development. If you even Google pictures of us when we're early developing in our mother, we have this same basic plan. But keep in mind, it's just a plan. That doesn't mean everything ends up looking like that. So here are the things we mentioned. The notochord goes down the middle. There's your muscle segments. This is your dorsal hollow nerve cord. And then you've got some gill slits here, and of course a mouth and an anus, and there's that post-anal tail. Remember, it's just a plan. Okay, so let's go over each one of these individually. So a notochord is a semi-rigid, like rod-like structure. It basically gives the organism structure and some protection. It is between the digestive system and the nerve cord. It will become part of our backbone. Invertebrates, like for us, it becomes the discs between each, the cartilage discs in between each one of our vertebrae. And it provides support and protection. Okay, you see it pointing to this in this organism here, which we'll talk about what he is in a minute. Okay, the dorsal hollow nerve cord. Just to break that down, you know what a nerve cord is. Hollow, of course, means it's empty on the inside, and that's how they can do like spinal taps on people. And then dorsal means it's more on the back. Up until this point, when we looked at the crayfish and those other invertebrates, their nerve cord was on their belly, which would be ventral. So once you switch over to chordates, it flips more to your back. So the head region here where it says anterior, that becomes the brain. Posterior becomes the spinal cord. And then of course we have all these nerves that connect to it and connect to our muscle blocks and skin and various things. And then invertebrates, obviously this the discs surround that to protect it. Okay, gill slits. Here they are here. They almost look like strainers, which they should to you. So these are usually in pairs. Invertebrate chordates like this guy here, we'll talk about him in a minute, use it to strain water and get food. In fish and other organisms, it could become their gills, and then it could become our lung tissue or different tissues in vertebrates. Okay, then muscle blocks is basically just stacked muscle layers that are anchored by the notochord to give us better movement and flexibility. And then in other species, it helps them move their tail. And the only reason I put this picture of this big tuna or salmon or whatever this is up here is because you can actually see the blocks of muscles. And if you've ever opened up like a can of tuna, you know how it comes out like in chunks? That's because of the muscle blocks. So all muscles are kind of arranged that way. Okay, so now that you know the basic structure, I want to talk about two groups of invertebrate chordates. They're really strange groups, so here's what that means. It means they have the spinal cord, but they do not have vertebrae. So they're very different from some fish and some reptiles and some mammals and stuff that you're familiar with. So there are 2 subphyla here. So they belong in the phylum Chordata, which means they have that spinal cord. But there are 2 subphyla and they are very different. This first one is called Urochordata. Okay, we call them Tunicates or sea squirts, and I'll attach a video so you can actually see them in action. They only look like a chordate when they're a larva. So that means when they're first developing. The only thing they keep of those 4 or 5 characteristics that we talked about is their gill slits. So they kind of metamorphosize into this strange looking thing and they lose their characteristics. And I'll show you those in just a minute. So when they're larvae, they swim around like a little tadpole, but when they're an adult, they kind of sit down on the bottom. So they're about the size of a potato, maybe the size of your fist if they get pretty large, and all they do is filter feed, and they can squirt a jet of water to protect themselves. So that's why we call them sea squirts. Okay, so here are 2 pictures of these, and I'll attach this video soon. Okay, here is the larval form. So notice it has all those things: gill slits, dorsal hollow nerve cord, notochord, muscle blocks, etc. This is as an adult. So they change from this to this. They are on the substrate and they filter feed, and they can squirt water out of all of these openings, kind of sort of like a sponge, but obviously much more advanced. So this is why we call them sea squirts. The second group, same phylum obviously, subphylum Cephalochordata, which translates to head cord, and we call these lancelets. They are streamlined. They're only about 5 centimeters long, so that's pretty small. Kind of sort of like a fish, but not. They also filter feed, and they bury themselves into the substrate with their head sticking out, and all they do is kind of filter feed and eat all day long. Now, these are different from the tunicates because they keep their chordates throughout their entire life. So they'll have their notochord, their dorsal hollow nerve cord, gill slits, etc. from birth until death. And they only have 1 layer of skin, which has no pigment at all to it, no scales, and then they have some tentacles. So although they may have the basic body plan of a fish, they are definitely not fish. So let me show you those. Here is one actually like where it would be in its natural habitat. Notice it's kind of clear looking with no color. He's buried into the substrate here, a bunch of shells and stuff. Here's his mouth where he keeps just a little bit above ground, and that's how he eats. And then this is one of those stained, so you can see it better, all of its gill slits, mouth region, and of course it goes much longer than that. But that's a lancelet. It kind of looks like a lancelet, you know, like maybe a scalpel blade or something. So that's where it got its name from. Okay, so here is its basic body plan. I just want to show you that it keeps its characteristics. There's its tentacles with its mouth, notochord, dorsal hollow nerve cord stay here, gill slits stay here. Post-anal tail, this is a good picture of that. See how it's after the anus. And then it's got some little muscle blocks. So those are those groups of chordates that are invertebrates. And that's where I'd like to stop. So I have a video for you, a crash course video on invertebrate chordates. And feel free to stop it at about 4 minutes and 15 seconds because he goes over the groups and then he goes over all the vertebrates, which is where we're going eventually. So if you'd like to watch the whole thing, you can, but you can stop at around 4:15 or so. And then I'm also going to attach some videos of the sea squirts so you can actually see them in action. Hope y'all are doing well. Email me with any questions.